Welcome to the Republican Professor. Today we have a very special guest with us again, Mr. Jeffrey Tucker of the Brownstone Institute. Thanks for being here, Jeffrey.
Well, so nice to be here again. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Jeffrey was on last year. Gosh, it's been over a year now. And we have, as a guest co-host today, Miss Jonalyn Fincher joining us from Exeter, New Hampshire.
Lovely to be back so soon, Lucas. Thanks for having me.
So I asked Jeffrey to come back on because I'm always interested in what Jeffrey has to say about pretty much anything. But gosh, everybody's talking about RFK Jr. I did it. I kept saying JFK earlier. Jeffrey, do you have any thoughts? Because this guy, I think actually he could possibly pull it off. Possibly.
Yeah. Well, Trump won in 2016, so nobody believed that was possible. I mean, right. People, when Trump first started running, people, Huffington Post said we're not going to cover him in the political pages, but rather the entertainment section. So, they were dismissing him really hard. So, on the other hand, there was an open primary back in those days, and the Democrats have no intention of letting anyone near the primary process in terms of debates or anything else. But, anything is really possible. I mean, if the system still works, then I guess that's still, at this point, it's kind of a big if. But if it does, I do think he has a chance. Certainly, he would not be running if he didn't believe he has a chance, because there's nothing in it for him. He's fixed up. Right. He's fine. He's got a good career. But he was living a happy private life. And now he's taking, plane trip a day and giving 5 speeches a day and giving constant. He's been hounded by the press. Every word he says is being recorded. Even in an off-the-record interview the other day with New York journalists, off the record. I mean, it was just a dinner party. Somebody had a phone in their pocket, started recording him, and excerpted out of context stuff that led immediately the New York Times and the Wall Street Advocate, the whole establishment press to say, this guy's an anti-Semite. So it put him on his back foot, and so he had to defend himself every day. So nobody needs this. I mean, it's crazy. There's nothing he doesn't need it. Some of these people run for office because they're opening businesses. They find that it's kind of a great racket, trick a lot of people into thinking you're going to save the country. They give you money, then you flip the money over into a super PAC and pay all your friends. I mean, it's kind of a way to open a business, but that's not the case here. I mean, he's running because he still believes that we do and should live in a democracy, and he's furious about this state of the country and where things are going, and he wants to be in a position to do something about it. He also believes that he's the right guy for the job because he's been fighting bureaucracy all of his life. And he, more than any other candidate, has really figured out the key problem in America today, which is he calls corporatism, which is the old word for fascism, really. And it's a merger of business and government. And the businesses, in this case, media, big tech, and big pharma, all rolled into one that's united with these federal agencies that are sort of live and operate outside of any kind of democratic control. He knows this better than anybody else, and that really his platform is to speak the truth about what's going on in this country and to do what he can to dismantle it. So it's, in that sense, really brilliant. He spoke in New Hampshire when I was just there for Porkfest, and I was really honored that his team asked me to introduce him. So
really.
Yeah, so I was.
Yeah, well, I just watched you. I thought you did a fine job, Jeffrey.
Thank you. Well, I had no idea what I was going to say before I got up there, and then I just, and in my own mind, I counted out the months between the beginning of the lockdowns and that day, and it was 40 months. And so that I thought, 40 has this sort of poetic,
biblical
meaning, biblical in our religious history. Is 40 years in the desert. Wandering, and then Jesus was went to the wilderness for 40 days to be tempted by the devil, and even now there's 40 days between Lent and Easter for the Catholic calendar, and I think it's true for Eastern Orthodoxy too. So, and there's other other numerological significance to this. So I just pointed that out, that, is he our emancipator? Is this the emancipation? Is it happening? Better 40 months than 40 years.
Yeah.
You can always find something worse to compare it to, I'm sure. That keeps you optimistic.
Yeah, that's right. Well, given that I thought the lockdowns were going to last 4 hours, and then I thought maybe they'll last 40 days, but I certainly didn't imagine that they would go on for years.
How long when it first happened, how long did it take for you to catch on, to figure out this is?
Well, so the problem is I figured it out before they actually were implemented. So I figured it out from
that.
Yeah, February 27th was.
I remember that.
The clue. And that's only because of, the tea leaves, which is to say the New York Times. I read them very well. And that was the day of the podcast where Michael Barbaro and Donald G. McNeil, their lead bias reporter, were departed from 100 years of tradition of public health advice. Instead of telling people to stay calm and see the doctor if they get sick, they were screaming that everybody should panic and disinfect everything, and 1 in 6 of your friends is going to die. I mean, it was the craziest, looniest podcast I've heard in my life. And I thought after that, there's no way this is an accident. Somebody put the New York Times up to this, and they decided to be the first ones to break the ice and signal the coming lockdowns. And of course, it was 2 weeks later, basically. And then then December 8th was South by Southwest was canceled by unilateral dictate from a mayor in Austin, Texas, who was an idiot, and he wouldn't have done that without somebody's higher up permission. And then 4 days later, of course, we had the travel restrictions from Europe. It was interesting. Back in January, Trump blocked all flights from China, and everybody on the right was saying, "Oh, yay, we don't want those dirty Chinese here anyway with their awful virus." Well, I mean, a couple months later, sure enough, it's Europe, UK, New Zealand, and Australia, right? So that was on the 12th. I wasn't not even aware that the president alone had that kind of power, but he did it, breaking up families, romances, shattering every vacation. I mean, none of those tickets, by the way, have ever been reimbursed by anybody. And then
weddings, funerals.
Yeah, weddings, and then everybody who was out of the country was told to come back to the U.S. I mean, can you imagine? In 3 days, they said that they had 3 days to get back. And they were trying to talk about social distancing at the time. Well, every international airport in the United States was crammed. There were 8-hour waits at customs and passport checks. Yeah, it was just crazy. So it was like super spreader events into the extreme.
I took a flight from LAX the summer of 2020, and I came back in Orange County. So LAX, Orange County, if you know anything, that was a perfect window into the whole country, because at LAX it was paranoia. It was like it was irrational too. So it was paranoia and rational. Like you had to be disinfected, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And then they cram you into an airplane. There's the irrational part where you're standing, but you have to wear a mask unless you're eating. So then people were like eating forever and drinking the straw forever, like I was.
Oh, wait a minute. This is summer of 2020?
2020. And then I came back through Orange County, and Orange County was like, I saw a statue of John Wayne, and I was like, oh, this is America. I'm still in America, apparently, because it was no irrationality at all.
Yeah. What a crazy time, right? Mostly in those days, the flights were empty. There were flights.
Mine was packed, and I couldn't breathe with the stupid mask. I couldn't breathe, and I know, I don't need a doctor to tell me that I'm, I can breathe when I don't feel like I can.
Right.
So I probably this probably just got taken off of YouTube just now by that comment, but.
Well, what was remarkable too about the masking situation is that it was very well known factual information that was not exactly disguised. In fact, Fauci himself said it. Well, everybody said you don't have to. The holes in the masks are thousands of times larger than than a particle of virus. So there was no chance that masks could achieve anything in terms of stopping SARS-CoV-2. It was ridiculous. So the whole thing was a panic device. It was a kind of a fake prophylactic, you know.
Well, they were saying it was in the droplets. Remember that? And the droplets can be caught by the.
Yeah, but not the virus itself. I mean, so
right.
I mean, you know, it's just so. And then they had their great Swiss cheese model, you know. But the great fundamental error here was the idea that the way to deal with COVID was to avoid it at all costs. I mean, that's just simply not true for any respiratory pathogens.
I'm glad you said that.
True. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, and the whole your piece on cleanliness.
Oh yeah,
I forget what it's called.
Clean and unclean.
Clean and unclean thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that was my favorite. That was my introduction to you, Jeffrey. I'm a brand new fan, and
okay.
Felt like you were putting your finger on something that even my 7-year-old could articulate and was frustrated with, but felt like he couldn't say. He couldn't be the boy that said the emperor's naked. And I just noticed that there's so many people they knew what they were experiencing with their eyes, and they were certain that something was off, but they were self-censoring, which I mean, that's what I believe Tom Harrington tonight, you're having that supper club in Connecticut with Brownstone to celebrate some of his awareness of the self-censoring and what it's doing to the younger generation. You can't have these free and creative conversations anymore. Sort of like swing it back to RFK. He's saying the things so many of us have been thinking, but he's doing it with intelligence, with more research than most of us could ever sustain. And he's doing it in a non-showy, I'm the savior way that really invites a lot of trust. He's not as charismatic as I think people are accustomed to, and he has information that's worthy of listening. His video that Epoch Times did on the real Anthony Fauci, I was just so delighted and also moved to know how long Fauci has been working unhindered and encouraged and promoted in pay. And when I saw the work you were doing, and I saw you were connected with Simon Godek, I don't know if I'm saying his last name right. It just gave me such a charge of hopefulness. Even if I'm not all on board with RFK, I'm so grateful that you have continued to speak boldly and articulately, and you're making room for other people to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's the job of Brownstone. I mean, our purpose is to be a sanctuary, or, you know, sort of a salvific institution to give voice to these people who have been blocked. I mean, we can't forget that, you know, for 3.5 years, there have been massive censorship. It began immediately after lockdown, really. You know, they shut you down, shouted you down, shut you down, throttled you, finally banned your accounts. And a lot of people got just fired from their jobs. I mean, for the masking issue, you know, that was the first purge. Well, the first purge was, you know, sort of, are you scared of COVID? If you're not scared of COVID, that you're a bad person, you're a grandma killer. And then the masking thing became a standard, and people were being kicked out of stores. I mean, it's funny. I got kicked out of several stores because so I wasn't not wearing a mask to be belligerent. I was not wearing a mask to inspire others to emancipate themselves. So that was my thinking. If I went without a mask, other people could say they could too. Because I mean, it was weird. I mean, the mask has always been a kind of a marker of slavery. And
well, there were people on the other side of that were wearing it. There was one person getting out of a car, driving by themselves, had a mask on. I said, "Why are you wearing it by yourself in the car?" And the person said, "To inspire others." So you have this back and forth of, okay, well, I'm taking mine off. I'm going to drive without it. I'm going to drive by myself without it to inspire others.
Yeah, right. I still won't go back into those stores that kicked me out last time. I've been a little bit slow to forgive on this COVID issue, you know. So I got kicked out of one store. It's a nice family grocery store, and it was I don't know, some woke employee tossed me out, and I still have not gone back. I drove by there. In fact, this morning I thought, nah, I'm still mad about it. The NIH, we recently discovered, had several memos back and forth between top scientists in which they were arguing that that N95 respirators should be mandated for every American, absolutely mandated, for all indoor and outdoor, wear. And they exchanged this, and the precedent they cited for this was like all the terrible things in U.S. history. It's like, well, we interned the Japanese, we shut down speech during World War I. The guy even pointed out, said, well, Lincoln suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War, so surely we can mandate N95 respirators on every American. So that came very close to happening. That's how grim it was. Bad times.
I think it's good not to forget that then.
Yeah. And so let me just go back to this purge point. So it's a sort of successive purges. So, and the first round of purge was that if you get COVID, that's proof that you're unclean and reckless and non-compliant. So, and so people were being shamed. Oh yeah, you got COVID, huh? You must be a bad person. So that was round one. And then it was, oh, you're not wearing a mask. That really makes you a bad person. And then, of course, we had the vaccine. And you had to accept this on faith because you don't know what's in it. It's a new technology. It's never been tested. The safety profile was unclear. It's, so the safety and effectiveness of this vaccine were always in question. But what was not in question was the necessity. We had known since early February 2020, that COVID only had medically significant outcomes for a small cohort of the population, mostly defined by age and comorbidities. All right, so we knew this already, that if a working age people were of almost zero danger, a healthy person, under the age of 30 is near zero, and children were of no risk whatsoever. So we all knew all this. So none of these mitigation measures were effective, and they weren't even necessary. That's the shocking thing to me. And yet they wanted 90% of the population to be vaccinated. And they started off with 70, and then they went to 80, and then they got to 90. And that included, of course, at the end of the day, children, right? So, which was, a complete shock. And so you had to, right. That's how extreme it got. They like a good cult, they asked you to believe things that were not believable and act on them as proof of your devotion to the cult.
Exactly like a cult. It's exactly like dysfunctional families and groups where you're proving yourself by admitting that you can't trust your experience. Yeah. And you're outdoing each other by admitting more than you can believe to prove your allegiance. It reminds me of all hazing and fraternities and sororities. It reminds me of what the popular girls did and how they dressed and how we would do things to prove we belonged, that we knew were bad for us.
Amazing.
And it's the same thing, but it's writ large. And I think the thing that was so terrifying for us small business owners who are just trying to keep our head above water is, if you don't do this, it's not just that you're going to lose your friends, because you're going to find out who your real friends are, which to me is always an encouraging, purging, painful, but as a good experience to know who really is thinking around me. But you're going to be punished in major ways with your job, with your finances, and really with access to medical care. If you don't really know what this virus is and you're told we can't take care of you because you didn't get vaccinated. I mean, I was told that by my doctor. Because I was unvaccinated, I was unable to be cared for. I mean, the reality is we all did okay. My whole family did okay. But to know that my choices were discounting me from society's meaningful helpfulness was a terrifying place to be. With really, it was difficult to get access to so much information.
Remarkably, many students left college. Many professors lost their positions because they wouldn't comply. Many people left the military. So that was the great third round of the purge. The point was to purge all of academic, public sector life, media. There's lots of vaccination mandates within media. The goal there was to use the vaccination as a tool, not so much of mitigating a disease, but as a way of discovering who the people were within your ranks that were not trustworthy from your point of view.
Yes.
Well, basically, it was a hunt for Trump supporters. At least that's so. Not getting vaccinated is fascinating to me. How it became
that's fascinating.
Yeah, it was. They used vaccination status as a kind of a rough proxy for it was a witch hunt to find whomever was responsible for the Trump presidency. So, and it was fascinating because
that's why RFK Jr. is so interesting, because he like what my friends, he said, they say, oh, he's not actually for the Second Amendment. Because he would sign an assault weapon ban, for example. I don't know how they get that information, because from what I hear, those kind of things are censored on social media platforms. And I've heard of a trustworthy source that said that his video was taken down on RFK Jr. But what I do like about RFK, I mean, he is a Democrat, but what I do like about him is he has been censored. And that is a little bit of a trust. That's a handhold for me, because I've been censored, and it sucks. I hate it worse than almost anything, is when I'm censored. I hate it. But he's been censored, and he knows what it feels like, and he knows who's doing it and why. And so I feel like he might have good instincts on at least some things.
Oh, I think on most things. I mean, there's some issues I have disagreements with, but in general, I'm very impressed with his outlook. His anti-statism was very interesting. His awareness of the problem of corporatism.
But is it genuine though? Like, because I saw a video of him in San Francisco, and I liked the video. It was great. I think it was an ad, actually, maybe, but it was on Instagram, and he was just panning around this dead street, and he was like, how he talks, there's Barney's, there's Disney. He's like, these great American companies, and I was thinking to myself, okay, they're not great companies. You lost me there, but it is unfair that they were shut down. I don't want to see that happening to anybody, but they were out of business. Those locations were shut down. They're out of business forever in San Francisco, and he was upset by that. And so, I'm not sure if it seems like he kind of likes the woke corporatism a little bit, and that's what I was a little bit worried by.
I've not really seen that. I think his concern was that San Francisco is being destroyed as a city, and it certainly feels that way about Dallas and Boston, which is basically his home. All these cities were wrecked by first the COVID lockdowns, and then everything that followed. The vaccine mandates were. I mean, it's hard people don't remember this, but there were like 5 major American cities that were shut down for the unvaccinated. Like, you could not get a drink, couldn't go to the theater, you couldn't go to the library.
Which 5 were they? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was Boston, DC, New Orleans, the whole of New York City, and Chicago. So they were all segregated. And incredibly, according to the demographics of vaccination, nationwide, especially in these big cities, as many as half of 40 to 50% of the members of the Black communities in these cities chose not to get the vaccine for obvious reasons. I mean, it's like they're not going to trust, the man with his potion and his magic shot. And so the disparate impact on Black folks in this country was overwhelming. So we actually segregated all these cities in effect by race, in a way that had a disparate impact on race, for all the world looked exactly like racial segregation. The mainstream media had nothing to say about it. I read exactly one article that pointed this out, and it was in the Epoch Times. Otherwise, everybody just ignored it. We reimposed
and you wrote it, right? I'm just kidding. Who wrote the Epoch Time one?
I consulted on it.
And Lucas, RFK has been the one to point out how media has abdicated their typical place where they're supposed to be focused, which is what is the phrase he used at Porkfest, Jeffrey, about holding the power to account? It was a phrase he used several times.
I don't know. He's so articulate and so good, and he's ferocious, and he's really passionate about all the
ferocious is the right
Well,
word.
he's gonna have to. He's gonna have to convince people like Jonalyn if he wants the nomination.
Well, I want to know
in New Hampshire. He's got to go to New Hampshire first. He's got to go to New Hampshire and convince people like Jonalyn.
I think he's gonna win New Hampshire. In fact, a lot of Democrats love this guy.
They do.
Yeah.
What do you disagree about with him, Jeffrey? I want to know where you disagree with him.
I think he. I get concerned about his views on the best methods for energy production. He's somehow certain that that we can with a good market for exchanging for collecting and distributing accumulated energy from wind and solar power, that we wouldn't need fossil fuels in this country. That's what that's what he says. And there's a number of things about that. I mean, I'm not an expert in energy, but he says the grid is all screwed up, that it's all sort of corporatized and bureaucratized and cartelized. And so, for example, you would love, as a small farmer, to dedicate some of your land to solar power, and accumulated that energy, and that energy which you don't use, you put out on a market, which you're not permitted to do now unless you're a major corporation, right? So he thinks that through this method you could have a market that would somehow displace the need for fossil fuels. And my concern about that is, that he might embark upon some grand Eisenhower-style big government program to reconstruct the entire electrical grid to make it more compatible for renewable energies. And I just don't believe that. I'm very skeptical of that. I'm a fan of fossil fuels. I don't believe that that we can game the system in a way that would make them somehow go away.
Now, when you say Eisenhower style, are you referring to his final speech?
No, I'm talking about his interstate highway system. Sorry.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Sorry.
His final speech was great. No, it's the interstate highway system. So I'm a little concerned that RFK has too much faith in government, basically. I mean, just to sum it up, that's how I'd put it. For example, he always talks about the desperate need to clean up these bureaucracies. I'm just one example. The FDA and NIH are entirely controlled by big pharma, right? And he's right. I mean, the Department of Agriculture is controlled by big ag that games all the rules against small farmers. I mean, you could just go through the list. The Department of Housing and Urban Housing or Urban Development is entirely run by big real estate developers. I mean, so he's right about this. It's hard to tell what's the hand and what's the glove, and they all kind of work together, and it's kind of grotesque. I think his plan for fixing it is to root out the industrial interests from these bureaucracies. And I'm trying to imagine what that looks like, really. And let me just put it this way. I'm not sure that these agencies would really improve in absence of private influence. It might actually get worse, if you know what I mean. Like the FDA, without any input from pharmaceutical companies, God knows what it would turn into. It's bad now, but it can always get worse. So
if you want to see what a government looks like, totally absent of private influence, just look at the Soviet Union.
That's kind of, although that was a fascistic system too. But these are fundamental philosophical questions. But they may become really relevant under an RFK presidency, right? So, but anyway, it's only 4 years. I would love to see him make a tremendous mess of the administrative state. Just like wrecking everything, and saying if you go to work for the FDA, you can't go to work for a pharmaceutical company for 10 years after you quit. I mean, I don't know what that would do. Nobody would do it. I mean, it would just be great. So it'd be fun to watch it, So my preference is for, an abolitionist. I would like to see, a guy go in there and really smash all 413 government agencies. I don't like any of them.
Well, I'm in the same boat with you, but I've heard this language of draining the swamp once before, and I just listen to RFK. I keep hearing that he has tremendous faith.
Yeah.
Human spirit to do what is right. And I also have tremendous faith in virtue and people to listen to goodness and to follow God. But there's an incentivization in all bureaucracy in the government to stop shrinking as soon as you have a job there. I don't sense that RFK is dialed in to the solution for big government is not more government oversight.
Or purging government of all private influence. I mean, this is so he's identified a very serious problem. He's not as clear on the solutions. He's great on civil liberties, by the way, on every aspect of civil liberties.
Yes,
with now the gun issues, I think it's
what about guns?
Well, it's a sticking point. It's a sticking point for him, right? But even there, I mean, he's explained it many times. I've heard him now on 3 or 4 or 5 different occasions talk about it, that now is not the time to raise questions about the Second Amendment gun ownership rights. Because,
the government smooth though. Like at Pork Fest, he was really good at saying, "This is a divisive issue. I'm not here to divide."
Right.
Well, it would be like a it would be like a Republican. It would be like a Republican after Roe versus Wade say, "This is not the time to deal with that."
I don't sense he's probably going to prioritize it at all. I mean, he has a lot of respect for the rural experience of Americans. He said, like being American, gun ownership is kind of part of American. He loves that and gets that, but he doesn't understand that gun ownership is not about being like just a bastard, and like feeling macho. Like for me, gun ownership is about saying I have the capacity to defend my 2 boys if my husband's out of town, because the cops aren't going to get here in time. And I hate the fact that I have to know how to operate a sidearm. But I don't think RFK understands what just the power differential between a man and a woman and what gun ownership does. And he'll even call some of the things I want to use to properly stop some crazy from getting into my house. He'd call them an assault weapon. I don't think he understands. This is like a little bit of an elitist in him. I don't think he understands how there's a freedom bound up with the capacity to defend my life.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is, what he imagines America is as it was when his uncle died, and like 1962. That's the world he wants to and he romanticizes that world in many ways, for good reason, right? But I don't think these high-powered weaponry that you see so common in the United States today was common in 1962. So I think he would be great with like gun clubs in schools and sort of shotguns, and shotguns, on the gun rack and in every home. I mean, that's not a problem for him. But I think he's just concerned about the what he calls the assault rifles. But I don't think those concerns are really driving him. And he said he would sign legislation if it were passed by both houses of Congress, which would never happen. Let's just be clear about that. That would never happen. So basically he said he would never touch guns. So that's fine.
He has a lot of respect for the Supreme Court ruling, which he believes is very like a wide interpretation of the amendment. That's his view.
Yeah. Well, so that's a good ruling for him because it allows it. So here's the thing. I think that RFK has become, in very fast motion over 3 years, pretty much of a libertarian. But people don't make that shift all at once, and so he's
fair enough.
Yeah, and he's kind of
are you saying people changed, Jeffrey? Is that what you're saying?
I think the lockdowns really shifted him.
Conversion is slow when you're older.
And also you have to make sense of it. I mean, like the human mind is funny. We like to believe, when we believe something new, we're very reluctant, and most of the time we're right, to think that this is completely de novo, that we've changed our minds, that we used to be stupid and now we're smart. Mostly what we try to do is say, I had a sense of this in the past.
Yes. Something was fishy about that.
And it's true, I said some things that are slightly different from this one, but when I said those old things, that was because there were different circumstances. And so I think that's what he's doing in his mind. So for example, he gave a big speech, I think yesterday, where he said he would like to back the dollar with Bitcoin. you know. And so like, yeah, so he's like,
He said that?
yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh.
he said fiat money is dangerous. All it does is fuel big government and powerful people and subsidize finance at the expense of the real economy. So what we need to do is ground the dollar in something real, gold and Bitcoin and other precious metals and that sort of thing. So he's like, he really wants to restrain the Federal Reserve, but in talking about it, he roots it in something that happened in the JFK administration, where JFK was talking about it. I looked this up the other day. It didn't seem very significant, but it seemed as if JFK was toying around with the idea of some kind of silver standard for the dollar that would restrain some aspects of federal discretion over monetary policy. So it was a fly-by-night thing. As far as I mean, I don't know. I've read the conspiracy theory that's why he was assassinated. So you never know about these things, but it didn't seem that significant. But so he goes back through his family history to find a case in which his own family has favored curbing the power of the Federal Reserve using monetary restraint and monetary reform rooted in silver, and he like updates it to the 21st century and says it should be Bitcoin now. So you see how his brain's working.
I do, and this is where I think his greatest weakness is that he is using JFK as almost a godfather, a template, if you will, for the way he needs to be. He's a Kennedy Democrat.
Yeah.
There are so many things I already don't agree with JFK on, but now pulling JFK forward into 2023, 24, right. You can't be identical.
That's true.
There's a nostalgia, a romance to it.
Exactly. You said it. There's a nostalgia, a romance, and that I think
that's why he could win.
So here I think
that's why Arnold Schwarzenegger won in California.
Yeah, it's why I think I have to disagree with you, because something strange has happened to America over the last 3 years. We have had this kind of weird collective amnesia. Hardly anybody remembers anything. We don't remember what life was like when we felt more or less free. We can hardly remember the calendar and the dates over the last 3 years. I mean,
that's what trauma does to you. Trauma.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's made us all crazy and confused. And so when RFK, when he stands up and talks and tells these stories about his uncle, tells these stories about his father, and then tells more stories. He tells the story of the Boston Tea Party. He tells the story of the Midnight Riot of Powell Revere. I mean, he tells, it's amazing. He's become like this national historian, and it's a weird feeling, even for me. I'm just like,
I'm glad you're thinking too.
Yeah, I was like,
I'm like, I don't remember that like that, but maybe he knows more.
Well, it's just weird to realize, we have a past.
He remembers Montgomery Wards.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, we have roots.
We're letting him recall who we were.
Exactly.
And we're grateful for someone doing the remembering work for us.
That's it.
That's wanted and needed. That's actually exactly what powered my show and my paintings, as people have gotten so broken at remembering. Exactly. They can't even wrap words around COVID, much less what life was like before that.
That's right. So I think he's doing a great service in a sense, and it's an attack on power, because in an Orwellian sense, government has made us forget by scrambling our brains, scrambling our world, ruining our rituals of life, and denying us access to weddings and funerals and travels, and just making everything so crazy. We've gotten disoriented and confused. So he's rooting us in the past. Like, this is our history. This is our shared national experience. This is what happened, and reconstructing this for us, going back 250 years. And he does it at every opportunity. I think that the idea there is to ground us and to root us to reality, and to remind us that we do have a history, we do have a past. We are a people of some meaning with a proud history, something to be proud of, which is also, that's the other thing the left has done. They've taken away our history, like a 1619 project. Oh, forget July 4th. That's stupid. Your dumb patriotic songs. Really, the real founding of America was 1619, right? As a slave state. So this is what they're taking, and then the tearing down of every statue. God knows who's being taken down today. So, and the people without a memory.
Well, there always has been that remember, the cornerstone speech of Alexander Stephens was a rejection of the Declaration of Independence. That was the cornerstone of the Confederacy. There
Uh-huh.
always has been
Uh-huh.
a presence of a skepticism of the riches of our heritage. You know, it was there in segregation.
Mm,
It was
mm.
there, you know, it always shows up in a form of statism of some kind.
By the way, I didn't remember that about Alexander Stephens,
Oh yeah, yeah.
but it makes sense, right? Because
1861. Yeah.
well, because the Declaration of Independence said all men are created equal and endowed them all with the
Right.
rights, so, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness.
Yeah,
Which,
the Confederates explicitly
yeah,
rejected that.
right, and it was interesting because Jefferson was, of course, himself an abolitionist and was against slavery, and even though he was a Southern Virginia planter, right, upper class planting class aristocrat, never liked slavery, and for that reason, the aristocracy of Deep South and the slaveocracy never liked Jefferson. They hated him, and when the Constitution was written, he wasn't really part of the construction of that. I mean, he came back from France in time for its ratification. It was a huge champion of the Bill of Rights, but the Constitution was written, especially the Fifth Amendment, to enable slavery to persist. If Jefferson had had anything to do with it, it never would have been constructed that way. So, in many ways, Jefferson is a great champion in the history of liberty. And it's just incredible to me that we've seen a hardcore Jefferson revisionism coming from this sort of critical race theory left, where they're this whole Sally Fleming's issue, and they're trying to demonize them. If you go to Monticello today, you won't hear a word about the Declaration of Independence or his history as an emancipationist or anything like that. You'll only hear about the slaves he owned and the way he oppressed his mistress. So they're trying to take even Jefferson away from us. So this is another great thing about RFK. I mean, he's actually proud of our founding. I mean, you wouldn't
and it's not a gimmick, right? It's not you think it's probably him sitting on his grandpappy's knee. What was his name? Joseph.
Yeah,
and Eunice or what his grandma, and they really did do that stuff. They had those kind of fire chat stories,
and they
probably listened to
believe in America. I believe in America. So they really do believe in this country and everything it's about and all of its values. That's embedded in the family. There's something very interesting about his sort of patrician outlook on American history, like a strong believer in the American experiment, as a democracy that guarantees equal rights and freedoms and civil liberties to everybody. He strongly believes in this ideal, and this is why he's running for president, to restore that. But for him, it's a distinctly American contribution to the entire world. And there's a funny story. I listened to the Twitter space that he held with Elon Musk, and his sort of patrician Americanism. It's also funny because he's also sort of the classic sort of New England Yankee, right? Aristocracy. So which I'm I'm from Texas, so it's good. I recognize it, but he doesn't recognize it, right? So anyway, he's so he thinks America is basically northeast corner,
Cape Cod.
Yeah, right.
That's how it is.
Sandwich.
I'm from Los Angeles, and I feel it too. I know exactly.
Yeah, he can't help it. It's just who he is. It's just funny. Every time he talks about, and on the Hudson River this, and then in the Boston Harbor that. That's like all he talks about.
I think it's Colorado where I grew up.
Yeah, and so that's funny. But he was talking to Elon Musk, and he was saying, listen, and Elon Musk is supposed to be interviewing RFK, but RFK is a very sort of sweet person, as in a person with his lineage and heritage and training would naturally be deferential towards others, right? It's just sort of part of the way these people are. They're trained to be that way. So he starts interviewing Elon. He goes, Elon, you're the thing I'm most impressed about you is you seem to have a strong belief in free speech, and you believe in this despite the fact that you really weren't even born in America, right? And Neil answered, well, no, I mean, it's true that I was born in South Africa, but I quite like free speech. He goes, well, now, in the United States, we have this First Amendment that guarantees us, freedom of speech. And it seems like you as a South African, though, have nonetheless come to really have a great appreciation for the First Amendment, just like we Americans do. How do you explain that? And he said, well, look, I don't know what to say. I mean, I was born in South Africa, moved to Canada, but now I'm American. I have an American citizenship. I'm an American. And RFK was utterly unflappable. He goes, well, look, however you come across this firm belief in the First Amendment, I just want to say I'm proud, that of this. It makes me proud as an American to have a person like you with your views, It was the whole thing was just hilarious. So his patrician, sort of charming old world American,
charming. It is
Yeah.
charming, and you feel like this is our chance in America to have had an aristocracy. That's what Camelot was all about.
Right.
But I feel even now a resentment for how JFK wooed and wrote. Trust them at all. So I come in at this and I look at someone like RFK and I want to say, don't give me your dad's line. Give me your line, number one. And number two, you're not going to have the media eating out of your hand like your dad did.
Right.
You're not going to have them. They're not going to have.
I'm back. Are you?
Back? Oh, woohoo!
I'm back.
I can see you, Lucas. We lost Jeffrey. Hopefully he'll pop back in.
Okay.
This is fun.
Hold on a sec. Hold on. Let me pause it.
It's hagiographical port.
Yes.
He wants to draw out this lineage, this sort of hagiographical heritage, in which we have this community of saints, from Washington to Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, and through Lincoln, FDR, and then finally his uncle. I mean, and then himself. I mean, and there's a great deal of mythology associated with that. On the other hand, I do believe Americans want to be proud of their history, and he wants to be the nation's historian. And I'm telling you, we need a historian right now. I really believe this. I'm not a conservative in that sense, but I don't believe that we can imagine a future of liberty unless we believe we have something to be proud of and a past of liberty.
Yes.
I completely
agree with that.
I studied history at Jefferson's College at University of Virginia, and I'm teaching history now to my two boys, home educating them, and history is where I find myself becoming the most fiery. Well, that and art, I'm really pushy about art too, but the stories we tell ourselves, what creates the men and women we grow into.
I totally agree with that. And we can't live in this world in which we're supposed to just hate ourselves, hate our country, hate our history, and not have anything. People all over the world say to me, they're like, you're so lucky as an American because you have a Bill of Rights and a Constitution and history of liberty. We, in wherever that happens to be, Brazil, don't have that same thing. Yeah. So, okay, if that's right, then we should rally around that, and we should believe in it, and we should teach that to our kids.
Amen. Preach it, Brother Tucker.
I think the biggest problem I see today is that every young person is looking into someone else's eyes to get a reflection of who they're supposed to be. There's very little self-confidence in owning their space. The immaturity has been prolonged so many years that people are looking for someone to be their savior and to give them a script and to give them their marching orders. They don't have that inner strength to say, this is where I'm uniquely gifted to contribute. I mean, even RFK standing so heavily on his uncle's, that's the kind of stuff that makes me go, wait a second here. Is this just for marketing? Because he knows if he says he's a Kennedy Democrat, he can get Democrats to kind of rally behind him? Or is this really the way he sees himself?
Well, he has to believe that he has a mission. I mean, he's doing crazy things. He was living a happy life, you know, with his.
So you don't think he needs power? You're not. That's not on your radar.
He certainly doesn't need what he's going through right now. I mean, I can't believe how brutally he's treated by the press. It's unbelievable. Every day there's a smear after a smear after smear. Every day, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New York Times. It's just this nonstop barrage.
Yeah,
you know,
and that seemed to fuel Trump. Trump seemed to get energy from that, but I don't think RFK Jr. gets the same kind of energy from that kind of opposition.
Well, he's mature enough to kind of see through it, and I appreciate that. I do too. Yeah. I mean, you know what?
You don't think he's owned by anyone?
No, I don't. I don't think so. He's owned by his own self-perception as a Yankee patrician in an entitled family that should be ruling America. That's what owns him.
Yeah.
And you know, I can imagine worse things. You know?
Yeah. I mean,
I think it's very sweet.
Yeah, I agree.
When I heard him at St. Anselm's 3 weeks ago, this was really my first introduction to him. So I'm coming to this as a newbie with just a lot of energy. Yeah. And I just want you to know the main thing he said, it was about foreign policy. He said the main job of a president, as my uncle said, was the president needs to keep America out of war. That is the number one job of president. Do you agree with that, Jeffrey?
I do think it's a priority, especially in the 21st century. I mean, yeah, I do, and I agree with him too. I really liked what he said the other day, that his uncles, you know, had a good relationship with Khrushchev. Now that was a risky remark to make, right? Because in saying that, you're sort of alienating, you know, everybody on the right wing that hates Khrushchev, you know, but he's right about Khrushchev. In fact, I'm going to write an article about this. I mean, Khrushchev was a reformist in the Soviet sense, constantly subverted by the bureaucracy. Khrushchev's main enemy during the Khrushchev rule was the corporate class in Russia and the bureaucracy of the Communist Party. He kept wanting to reform and free up prices and turn over state-owned industries to private enterprise and make the peace abroad and so on. In fact, he came to the United States and toured around, you know, and was very impressed by New York and that sort of thing, and went back trying to figure out how can the Soviet Union have an economy just as progressive and vibrant and growing as the U.S., and tried to make that happen. It didn't work, and you know, he was unseated from power, and during his later years. Was impoverished and spent his life, you know, sitting at the public parks feeding the pigeons with breadcrumbs. I mean, so Khrushchev was very.
In other words, he was a normal Soviet.
Yeah, right. But he was a very interesting figure in that period of time. And it's true that JFK reached out to him, and they both agreed we should not be at war. Let's get rid of these stupid.
Right, that red phone they installed. I just think, I mean, talk about like bringing James Bond into real life. It's like this capacity that they saw that we just have to talk because everyone around us. Look at you, Lucas. Hold that up. What is that? You can.
Oh, that's the old Cleon Skousen book, or Fred Schwartz. Yeah,
Fred Schwartz. Yeah, you can trust the communists. You can trust them to be communists.
He humanized Russia in that speech at St. Anselm's in a way that I thought was very provocative. The idea that Russia's point of view is not being listened to on either side. And what would it be like if we were in their shoes, and how would we treat them? And I mean, I appreciate that a lot. I don't know that I would say that's the number one priority. of the president. That's his interest.
Well, I don't know. War becomes, nobody cares about the war until it actually becomes a hot war, and then the Americans are dying. Right? But for the sake of peace, I think we need peace and good relations with Russia and China. So I wrote an article this morning for Epoch Times saying, proposing a kind of a rapprochement. With Xi Jinping, because we need that for trade purposes and for the future of American prosperity and peace around the world. We just need this, and nobody really, the Democrats want war with Russia, the Republicans want war with China. I'm like, how about we just go back to George Washington and have commercial relations with the world and no political entanglements with anybody? I mean, that would be the ideal system.
No, I agree. And I'm not a warmonger anyway. I hate war. I think it's one of the worst things.
Let me add something on the war thing. I'm going to bring it back to the Constitution, since I've had Charles Kessler on this and John Yoo, and some people are going to be watching this. I know not very many people, but there are key people that would watch this, and I want to get this point in case there's a staff member of RFK Jr. that watches this at some point. But going back to the Constitution, there is no one main thing that the president is supposed to do. There's duties and there's powers, but they're not really privileged. He's got a duty that he shall take care of the laws be faithfully executed, and it's left for the political process to determine what those laws should be. But he's got power to pardon, he's got power to appoint, things like that. But the point I wanted to make that was relevant to John Yoo's episode when he came in and talk about his book on Trump and presidential power is, it would be ironic that RFK Jr. would mirror Trump in that way, because what we're really talking about with the administrative state is executive control over the executive branch, right? We're talking about the Constitution is very clear. The executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States. It's not vested in the executive branch. It's executive. It's vested in one person.
That's right.
Not the vice president, the president.
Right. So the founders never even imagined such thing as the administrative state. So between the ratification of the Constitution in 1789 and about 1881, there was no such thing as a permanent employee of the federal government. That only began after the Pendleton Act, and the
constant war thing. Yeah. That is a relatively new thing, right? Last 50 years or whatever. And these are not declared wars, so that's brand new, right? After World War II, there had not been a declared war. It used to be back in the old days, and this is even before the Kennedys, that the wars were declared by Congress, right? And so now you have the administrative state really, I think, kind of has a vested interest.
Yeah. So it began with the Spanish-American War, the idea that we'd have the permanent war bureaucracy, and then it expanded with the Great War. Then with the income tax, suddenly we had the IRS, and then you had the Federal Reserve, and so it just got worse and worse and worse. And with the New Deal, of course, the FDR, had the whole agencies running industry, and then that got worse in World War II, and then it just everything multiplied. Now we have the civil service is the real government in America, and then the elected branches of the government are not even relevant. So Trump wants to be in a position to hire and fire out of the civil service, which I think is a good step in the right direction. The New York Times says, he wants to be a dictator. So the dictatorship they favor is an unelected dictatorship by the administrative bureaucracies. They don't want the elected leader of the country, ruling over them. So Trump
it's that whole democracy thing that they don't like.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, and I just, when I hit the roof when I read that article, so I wrote an article, and I'm not a defender of Trump at all, as everybody knows, but my article was, "No, Trump does not want to be a dictator." That's the title of my article. It's so ridiculous. But both RFK and Trump, and I should say DeSantis and Ramaswamy, all have a bead on this problem of the administrative state. They're gonna try to do something about it. Whether they will is another question, but at least we're talking about it now for the first time.
And you think that RFK might be headed in the right direction on that? Because
Yeah,
I think
I do.
you can interpret his stuff, his pro-civil liberties that you're saying, um, the concern with guns that we have is really a concern about the administrative state. It's a concern with the
Hmm.
ATF, for example.
Hmm.
It's a
Yeah,
concern for some of these administrative agencies that just
yeah,
make up stuff and they do whatever they want.
that's right.
And
It's
the
his
same
number
as
one focus. As I say, my concern is that he doesn't want to abolish these agencies. He wants to reform them. On the other hand,
sounds a little naive to me.
yeah, and
Unless what you mean is presidential control,
yeah,
which is the constitutional answer.
I don't think that's what he means. I think he has in his mind sort of a good government model that's very dated, I would say. That is that you get smart people out of Harvard, get the best experts, and get them in government,
McNamara.
and and
Sorry, I just had to think. That just reminds me of McNamara. You know, get Bob McNamara in there running defense.
and get them so they're not influenced by private industrial interests, and that therefore they'll make the right decision. Look, he's never said that, but I
No,
sometimes wonder if that's sort of his model. That sort of 1950s liberalism. But look, whatever. I don't think Jeffrey Tucker's vision is going to be going to be born anytime soon. So I do like the idea that he has a sense of what the problem is, and he's proposing to do something about it. That I find very intriguing, and it could be a first step, a first and very effective step to dismantling the bureaucratic machinery that's strangling the life out of this country right now.
Well,
I think if he does that, if he steps up and has a chance and he actually wins, how long do you think it's going to be before people are plotting to take him out? I mean, assassination, take him out. I'm going to ask what I've heard people say.
Well, that's assassination, but there's other ways to take people out, right? I mean, scandals and God knows. Look what they tried to Trump. I mean, they did everything, and they finally figured out. I just imagine meetings, in sort of the fall of 2019. It's like the Russia thing didn't really work. This Ukraine thing doesn't seem to be going really well. Does anybody have any other ideas? Well, he's a real germaphobe. Can we? We might be able to work with that. Oh, the old infectious disease trick, huh? We haven't tried that in a long time. And it worked on Trump. So
I just hope you're not giving anybody any ideas there,
well,
Jeffrey.
the CIA specializes in finding vulnerabilities.
That's true.
If
I was president, I would have one agency. It would be the CIA. I would abolish the Department of Education. Everything would be done by the CIA.
Yeah. Oh, really?
I'm just kidding.
Well,
I'm kidding.
In
case you didn't know, I have a very dry sense of humor.
RFK is not on the Jeffrey Epstein flight logs, so that's important. I think that's sort of the first thing you want out of a president is make sure you're not on the flight logs of the Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah. Good old Cheryl Hines has got him on that dog. She's got him on a tight dog leash there.
All right.
Curb your enthusiasm there, Mr. Robert.
Third time's
I love
the charm.
that show, by the way. I love that show. Are you familiar with that? His wife was on Jonalyn. Are you?
I've met her, but I never saw the show. No.
Oh, it's great. It's a great show. Yeah. Well, anyway,
I don't want. She does have him on a tight leash.
That's good because that's a good because that fits with his his wholesome presentation. He tries to have this wholesome Americana presentation, which we know for a fact was fake for many of the Kennedys.
I know that for sure. His Uncle Ted was a catastrophe. I mean, God, I could tell you stories you wouldn't believe about that guy. Woo.
What does his family think of him, Jeffrey? I don't know. How do they treat him? Is he the black sheep, or do they have a little backhanded respect for him, kind of being so cold? Or
when you say his family, because the family is gigantic. At the speech in Boston, at the opening speech, they had two whole wings of the balcony filled with Kennedy family fans and friends. So he's got a big family, and God knows families have ferocious political disagreements with each other. Right. We don't entirely understand why that is, but his family that big is going to have a lot of disagreements. So he's got some, wokesters in his clan, and others that love him. For that matter, he has disagreements with Cheryl Hines about some political issues, but he's got a core to him that I've noticed. That's very impressive, and I would call it a libertarian core.
So Jeffrey, would you give him a thumbs up or a thumbs down? I mean, I hesitate to put it that way.
I'm a fan. I'm a fan, and I consider these libertarian purists, and they're sort of scrupulous, sort of going through his life and condemning him. The Reason magazine has been absolutely the worst on that. I don't know if you've seen any of that stuff, but they're dedicating all their editorial capital to destroying RFK. Why would you do that? I don't know. But I don't agree with any of that. I think he's a hugely positive force. My own bias, I mean, like, for me, I'm drawn to either of the existing field. It's going to be just, from my mind, it's a toss up between RFK and DeSantis, and they both had their strengths and their weaknesses. I would say overall, RFK is better than DeSantis on foreign policy issues, and RFK also avoids the culture wars in a way in which DeSantis does not. DeSantis seems to have gone all in on the cultural war stuff, some of which I agree with. Sometimes it seems a little over the top, and maybe sometimes RFK neglects that too much. But I'd share his outlook, I would say, just in general, a little bit more. As I say, I have some doubts. Oh, I'll tell you the other area where RFK slightly bothers me. Okay. He's like the old Democrat, and that he just somehow thinks the labor unions are always great. It's like if a labor union is on strike, they're great, they're good guys. He's going to be there with them.
That's part of the baggage of the stuff you were just mentioning about how great it was 50 years ago. I mean, that's New Deal stuff. That's progressive.
I mean, we got 10% of the American workforce is unionized, and the unions that are left are the people that kept the schools closed, and I don't know. I mean, like, I mean, he was up protesting with the Hollywood writers. It's like, I'm pretty sure the Hollywood writers are going to be just fine, whatever. So I'm not really drawn to that, but I tolerate it a little bit. And there's another thing that's pretty interesting. The Supreme Court decision on the Harvard affirmative action thing, he was on the other side of that and said, "Oh, this is very bad. Harvard should give privileges to Black folks." And now, but here again, I'm of two minds. On one hand, yes, I cheered that decision because I'm sick and tired of
that's a civil liberties decision there, Jeffrey.
Well, and I don't like standards that I like merit-based hirings, and I think CRT and affirmative action and ESG and DEI corporate practices are a disaster. And so I kind of cheered that decision, but it does impose itself on what is ultimately a private institution. So here you have,
well, they're not Hillsdale College. They're taking a lot of money from the government.
Well, that's true.
And I mean, Hillsdale College would love to have their endowment. So whether they need that money or not, I don't know, but they sure take a lot of it. And so that's really the issue is, just like the Bob Jones issue. I mean, the Bob Jones issue in like the 70s, IRS came down on them for segregation for the exact same thing. And they said, hey, if you're going to racially segregate, then fine. You just can't have any tax money. You can't have a tax-free status.
So I'm not sure that the Supreme Court made any reference, however, to their public funding that goes into Harvard. I mean, I haven't read the decision, but I've not heard that. My impression was the Supreme Court said, look, colleges and universities cannot have race-based admissions
and remain tax exempt. It's a tax exempt issue.
That's interesting.
Just like the Bob Jones case in 1972 or whatever it was.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm not 100% sure about that, but I've with RFK, I've learned to kind of, I'm studying him like I'm watching a science project unfold or something like that. I'm very interested and what his biases are,
Me
and
too.
his positions, and I'm sort of curious. Sometimes he surprises me, and sometimes I wince, like, like out there protesting against the Hollywood producers on behalf
Yeah.
of the writers or whatever. I mean, I
It's
don't
like,
know.
is that maybe that's his wife? I don't know. He's in Hollywood.
Yeah,
I'm
maybe.
not
And
sure.
the other
But
thing is that these days I'm ready to believe that I'm wrong about something that I think I'm correct on. Right? I'm always willing to reconsider a lot of things. I'll tell you a quick example of this. I was at the symphony a couple of weeks ago, and all the symphony players were out front passing out flyers about that they needed pay raises as part of the music unions. Now, the old me would have said, shit, whatever. I mean, you know how many people play trumpet in this town? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm sorry you're not paid enough, but I was talking to one of them, and he said, these bastards, they locked us down and wouldn't let us perform for 2 years. Meanwhile, they all got pay raises and had their Zoomy jobs and kept their job. They work the administrative aspect, the fundraisers, and the bureaucracies of the symphony were all giving themselves raises and working full time. We, on the other hand, were not getting any money or any gigs, and we're sitting at home. So we come back and no pay raise whatsoever. So and a lot of inflation. So our wages and salaries are far lower now than they were 5 years ago. The management of this godforsaken institution, everybody's richer than ever, never missed a day in work. So we're just asking for a little bit of fairness. So I'm listening to this going, oh, I see that your speech was constructed perfectly for me. so I'm like, I can't say you don't have a good point there, So sometimes, you can pitch union causes in a way that appeal to me. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but
that's what it's exciting about being willing to change your mind. Do you think RFK will change his mind when it goes against his family's
well, so he's changed his mind a lot on a lot of things, I think. Gun rights is a good example. And I think on the lockdowns, he was shocked by that, and it's made him rethink a lot of things. So he does have an adaptable mind, and on economic issues, he's a little weak, just in general. Like, I'm not sure if he would know whom to appoint as a Treasury Secretary, for example. He doesn't live in that world,
That's my anxiety as well.
That's a good connection with the progressive fascination, from Woodrow Wilson on, with government by expertise. And this whole line, right? I mean, the question is, how do you get the expertise?
For sure.
You're not going to get it in college.
No.
You might be trained how to be a Democrat in college, be a wokester in college. I don't know. But you're going to be trained in industry. That's why. I mean, look at Bob McNamara. I mentioned him a while ago. He ran Ford or whatever it was before he was defense secretary under Kennedy.
Yeah, sure.
And so, he's trained in statistics, but he was in industry, and that progressive fascination with expertise, and you get trained in industry, is part of the whole regulatory capture thing we're seeing. And that's why I think it's a little bit naive to think that can be somehow reformed, unless you reform how people get expertise. And I don't know how you do that.
No, that's right. I mean, the offices of the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, and all the financial economic institutions have always been filled by major investment banking staffers. And, that's just the way it works. This way it's always, so you want to get
Girl Scouts.
Right. So you want to get experts in the Department of Treasury who've never had any experience in the financial industry. I mean, that could actually be worse. So I don't know what the answer is here. And I think RFK is going to have to deal with some of these problems.
Now, I don't know where the AFT gets their guys, because they don't know. They don't seem to know anything about the industry they regulate. But
I will tell you a quick interesting story about this, however, because RFK told me that he had, do you know the economist named David Stockman? He's on the board of Brownstone, and a good friend of mine. And he was Reagan's first budget director, and just a really great guy. Just overall, I mean, I think he's the greatest living economist, actually, in my mind.
Can you tell me his name one more time, Jeffrey? I want to write it down.
Yeah, David Stockman. Stockman.
You had me at Reagan.
Yeah, he was Reagan's first budget director.
Just kidding.
And
I gotta say, I'll keep an eye out for him. Please continue your story.
I have to
I
say
think
stuff like that on the Republican Professor.
he was the greatest living economist, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, so RFK said, "Look, my whole life I always thought I was on opposite sides of David Stockman. I mean, I defined myself against the Reagan Revolution, but now I listen to David Stockman. Everything he says sounds right to me, especially on matters of war and peace, but even on matters of Federal Reserve and economics. It's like I really want to have a discussion with him. Do you think he'd be open to it?" And I said, "Well, sure." So I wrote David and said, "What do you think about having a discussion with David Stockman?" And he said, "That's really interesting. I think I'd like to do it." Well, so they have a Zoom call together. You can actually look it up. But they talk for like 90 minutes. But here's what's interesting. So my hope was that David would like instruct RFK on all matters of economics, right? And the budget and the need to cut the budget and get the debt under control and, you know, all these things.
What
But
happened?
what actually happened is they talked the entire time about Ukraine.
Oh, golly. That's where RFK is most comfortable. It is.
So there you go.
That's his thing. He's so strong with that. And
Yeah.
He
That's a
can't
very
be an
human-
expert in all these fields. He's going to have to appoint people to these other places.
But
That's a
here's
very
the thing.
human story, though. That's great. That's a
Yeah,
human
but the
story.
thing is, he developed a good relationship with David
That's
during
right.
during that
That's
time. And so if RFK becomes president, why wouldn't he call up David and say, "Would you be interested in being my Secretary of Treasury?"
That's
Why
a
wouldn't
wonderful perspective.
why wouldn't that happen?
They
First, you
let
have to learn. You have to trust people on matters that are really important to you, and then you trust them on matters of their expertise. Something like that.
trust is the coin of the realm.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very interesting story there, Jeffrey. Thank you for telling that. What do you think about Ukraine?
Oh, I think U.S. needs to be out. You know, I mean, you know, these borders. We got a problem in Ukraine. Obviously, it's not a unified country.
Yeah.
And the U.S. needs to stay out of that, and Ukraine does not need to join NATO. And I would like to see NATO go back to being, I don't know why we need NATO, but if we're going to have NATO, it should at least go back to its original 1990 promise, you know, to not go 1 inch, you know, closer to Russia. I mean, like there's a way towards peace here, and it's got to have to do something to do with giving the eastern side of Ukraine some autonomy from Kiev. I mean, that seems to be the obvious answer. But we can't have war. This is crazy. But you can't also deny. You can't be having a government that's abusing its own citizens in the East, who feel a greater attachment to Russia than to their own government under which they live. I mean, that's not a viable situation. Anyway, it's not up for me to solve the Ukrainian problem. I just don't think that the U.S. needs to have anything to do it. We can have a role in brokering a peace there. And certainly, at the very least, stop fomenting the war. That'd be a good start.
All right. Well, I'm agnostic about the Ukraine thing. I feel like I would need to be in briefings to figure out what's happening. Because I don't know.
Well, I just exhausted
no idea
my knowledge. I did have somebody the other day ask me the problem of Nazis in Ukraine, which I'm sure you know something about.
Yeah.
And it's actually the story there is so incredible. I was able to give this guy a tutorial in a century of Ukrainian relations with Russia, and the reason why there's so many Nazis there now, and it's the most.
So there really are Nazis there?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. I was laughing because it sounded ridiculous to me, but okay.
No. I mean,
continue.
Nazis are all about the war on Russia, and yeah, it's got a huge Nazi element. Well, but it goes all the way back to Ukrainian famine and Russia German conflict in World War II, which is a much bigger theater of action than anything that the U.S. involved itself in.
Mm-hmm.
And many Ukrainians sided with Germany over Russia during World War II because of the 1920s Stalinist
Harvest of Sorrows. Yeah.
Harvest of Sorrows and all that kind of stuff. So there's like this extremely long history. And these are people that don't forget, unlike Americans.
Yeah.
They live and breathe history.
Robert Conquest, Harvest of Sorrows by the book.
Yeah, that's right. So that explains why there's Nazis in Ukraine today.
Okay.
I have a meeting that starts at 3:30, so I need to run, but I appreciate so much being with you today.
Jeffrey, thanks for coming on.
It's my pleasure. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, what'd you think? We're still recording, Jonalyn.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, a treat to find out Jeffrey's a real person, you know, like really being himself and rolling when he doesn't know with honesty. I just respect that a lot. Really respect that.
Yeah, I agree. He's a real person.
The real person. And Lucas, you are too. So watching you be your real self. Oh my word. I loved it. The way you were poking in the little bits of what you knew about how the Harvard decision, the Supreme Court is about. What did you say? You're like, Jeffrey, this is about tax money. And like, you know, I don't know that he made that connection before, and you're helping him think about it in a different way in your area of expertise. I'm just so proud of you. So glad to know you. This was a treat to be on. I can't believe you asked me. Oh my gosh.
Of course. Well, look at behind you. Look at that painting right there. That lady with her hand over her mouth. If it is a hand, it's probably not even her hand. It's a mask of some kind.
It's the way she felt about the medical establishment.
Let's get an update on your show. How's your show going? You got your show going? Yeah.
Going great. We've had probably 150, 200 people passing through from all over. Exeter is such a big hub for education. I think, let's see.
That's awesome.
So Istanbul came by and said, I saw a COVID show. The only other place I've seen a COVID art show was in Istanbul, and it was during the lockdowns. I was like, what? That's so awesome. And he told me about it. He told me how my show reminded him of it. I mean, what a compliment. Huge compliment.
Huge.
Amazing, amazing stories. So I actually have some of them right here. The stories people are telling me after they see the exhibit. It's just.
Do you have any examples that you'd like to share?
I'll share one.
Okay.
This girl came in. She didn't even know what my show was about. And before I knew it, she was writing this. When the school shut down, I lost my income. With the lockdowns, I lost my social life. The only thing keeping me going. I lived alone. So I did the only thing I could. I started hiking. Meanwhile, people on social media began parking lot shaming at trailheads. But I felt healthier than ever. So I kept hiking. That lasted for 2 years, and I hurt my ankle. At this place, she calls it the Wilder. These people paid mask bouncers to turn people away who weren't wearing masks. My friend refused, so I followed him, but I slipped on the soaking wet floor, keeping people safe. They didn't even have a sign warning people of the wet floor. I couldn't hike anymore. I caught COVID shortly after that. The vitamin D and exercise was what was protecting me, but those were the very things being shamed.
And that's the very kind of thing that will get this censored on YouTube, because it's a true story, not misinformation, but it's actually true.
That's what she wrote. That's what she wrote.
That's what she wrote. Yeah.
She was blown away that there were other people like her, and that there were the stories being put in a public place, and that she had access to them.
Wow.
This is why I painted Lucas.
Wow. That's powerful. Good for you.
Thanks for giving me.
Do you feel like the last time we talked was before your show?
Yeah, what?
Your art show. Yeah. So refer back to her episode just a couple weeks ago. Everyone. Have you had any regrets in the last couple of weeks, or has it just been confirmation?
No regrets. That's a great question. I have not had any regrets. I am learning so much about the community here, about people, about what art can do, about the power of beauty. I'm learning about my own capacity to be courageous. I think the only regret I have is that I didn't do more COVID paintings, because there are things I thought I should paint, but I ran out of wall space. at the little space of it, the exhibition.
Wow. Now you're in Exeter. Have you learned more about your community?
Oh yeah, definitely. See, my exhibit is broken up. One wall is all the COVID paintings, all 20 of them. And then the other wall are all my still life and landscapes. And I was anxious people were going to come in and be like, this is stupid art. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's just an amateur. And I haven't received that at all. I've had people walk in, even if they take one look at the COVID wall and they just whirl on their heel and either march out or they just like, I just want to look at her landscapes. I just want to be over here on this safe side. I'm learning about how people are self-censoring even what they look at. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of a teenage boy who's watching some film and there's some nudity in it and they quickly cover their eyes like, I'm not supposed to be looking at that. That's what it reminds me of. But these are adults looking at pictures like this.
Wow. Wow. That is a perfect analogy. That is so great. Wow. That's crazy.
It is. And I'm sitting up there, painting, just being quiet, letting the paintings do their good work.
So I know this is totally speculative, but based on our conversation with Jeffrey there and what you know about your community, how do you think that they would react to RFK Jr.?
Well, I actually know about RFK because of someone here in town who invited me, and she's done a ton of work drumming up support, and they're just doing something again this week to go do like a town hall meeting with him and other New Hampshire communities. There's a lot of support in New Hampshire for RFK, but there's a huge libertarian. This is like the libertarian state of the whole union. This is America's live free or die state.
Okay. Oh, that's a good, let me correct that. I put librarian. It was a librarian state. Hold on. Jeffrey, I think that's what Jeffrey meant too. Okay. So libertarian, how do you spell it? I thought it was so you guys are like fans of books. Okay. Libertarian.
My gosh.
I'm really happy that you're there still. And I want to get I don't think you're going to be there during the election though. So I was hoping for some on ground intelligence gathering, but
God's in control of all those pieces. We're possibly going to rent, possibly going to move. And if we rent, we'll be coming back for things like elections and maybe another art show. I'd love to do a part 2 and do like a year. They've invited me to come back every year and do like a month show here. And the space has asked me to extend my show for another month. So I'm going to be actually in the space all through August as well.
Wow. That's a huge compliment to you. Congratulations.
Thank you. I don't know if Jeffrey's going to come up, but it meant so much that I got to talk with him today. Lucas, thank you.
Well, I'll make sure that he knows that. And you're on the email, so just reply. And by the way, if you would mind just replying with that TV interview link, so that would be very easy for us to just boom, put it in there.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Jonalyn. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lucas. You have a great day.